My inventory is somewhat encyclopedic in the area of Western prints and drawings. I always had the motto in my business as to buying what I love as opposed to what I think I can sell.
This is Platemark. My name is Ann Shafer, and I am your host. I'm an independent curator specializing in prints and printmaking. You found us at Series 3 of Platemark, in which we're interviewing the wonderful people who occupy the print ecosystem. Today's guest is Jeannot Barr, who is a print dealer. He was at the very first print fair in New York City in the mid-'80s that became the legendary IFPDA print fair. So I wanted to talk to him about its organization and how it all started, what the beginnings were. So, we'll talk about other things, of course, but that was the prime reason for me wanting to talk to him. I think also it's worthwhile to get the oral history down of the beginnings of that storied fair. Okay, let's see. Housekeeping. My positionality, I identify as a cis het white woman, and I use the pronouns she, her. I record Platemark in Baltimore, Maryland, the land of the Piscataway Conoy people. Any images that Jeannot and I talk about will be available to you over on the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. Also over on platemarkpodcast.com, you will find two interesting things. There is a small round icon that has a microphone in it. And if you click it, you can leave a voicemail for me, and you can ask me a question or leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. The messages can be up to 60 seconds long. And also there is a support and donate button, which would help us keep the lights on here at Platemark. So click it and you'll find two options there. One is for a monthly membership donation of $5, and the other one is a self-determined single donation amount of your choosing. So head on over there. I think that's it. All right, buckle up and let's get rolling. Jeannot, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming on Platemark. We ran into each other at the New York Print Fair, and we drummed up an idea for an episode that I think is going to be really fun for people. Can you introduce yourself for our listeners?
Of course. I'm Jeannot Barr. I've been a professional prints and drawings dealer now for close to 37 years. I am the founder of the New York Fine Print Fair in 1984 and had a hand in helping set up all the rest of the print fairs in the United States in the 1980s and early 1990s. I have experience as far as setting up, but one of the reasons why I am no longer in the print fair business is because I want to become a prints and drawings dealer full time. So there.
Oh, I didn't realize you weren't a dealer at the time of the organization part.
I was, but I was becoming better known as a show organizer, and didn't want that.
Gotcha.
So we'll get into that later in the segment.
Yeah, probably. I think so. Can you describe your inventory for folks and what you specialize in?
My inventory is somewhat encyclopedic in the area of prints and drawings, of Western prints and drawings. I always had the motto in my business as to buying what I love as opposed to what I think I can sell. So I do have a select inventory of very good old master prints, including 17th century Dutch and 17th century French, 18th century Italian, 18th century French, 19th century French, of course, also with a specialization in the circle of Whistler, and then 20th century works of all schools that I like, and then contemporary works that continue the linear tradition in that regard. This goes to one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast is the fact that I did a study of my mailing list a few years back and found that 90% of my customers were age 55 and over. So really needed to get contemporary works for a much younger audience.
You're assuming I have younger listeners. Hello out there, if you're there.
Well, hello. Yes, we'll reel you in.
Right. Just give us a minute.
All right.
So, did you ever have a bricks and mortar gallery?
No, and that's one of the reasons, to some degree, why the print fairs were started. But to your question, a brick and mortar gallery for a lot of dealers would just weigh us down. dealers, we love to go out and explore and hunt for the treasures and so forth. And again, with the overhead, especially today, with brick and mortar galleries becoming somewhat obsolete, it allows dealers a lot more freedom. And that was always my premise when I founded the print fairs.
Yeah, the print fair brings, yes, it works for everybody, although it's a lot of work for you guys, but it does make it
Well,
easy for
yes.
us.
Well, I mean, the thing was with the print fairs, the original notion for founding the print fairs was that, and especially here in New York, was that a lot of dealers outside of New York really wanted access to the New York City metropolitan area market, wanted to gather their collectors really in one place. And that was really the original premise for it. I mean, we certainly, back in the old days, in the 1970s and the 1980s, when some of us were starting in business, we certainly, used the telephone, used the mails and so forth. But the real premise for the print fairs was to be able to shake hands and meet the people, meet the collectors, put the face with the invoice number that we wrote a couple of weeks ago, and bond a relationship. It's one of the things that I've always said to a lot of my colleagues. Yes, we deal in prints and drawings, but when it comes down to it, this is a people business. That was a driving force for finding first the New York Fair, and then because of its success, expanding out across the United States and Canada and Europe, really.
And people need to remember that this is all pre-internet. So you guys were publishing catalogs and mailing them to people and making phone calls. Like it was a whole different model, really.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I mean, there are a lot of dealers that still publish catalogs. I can think of Davidson Galleries in Seattle, do great catalogs. And of course, the old print shop does sporadic ones and so forth with Specialized. All these catalogs are of great source for information for collectors and dealers alike.
That does bring up a thing, as the person sitting in the storeroom at a museum trying to catalog things, the dealer catalogs were always a great resource for us just because you guys know all the ins and outs of what to look out for, with the Chagalls and the Calders and whoever else, like there's always a trick to each artist. And I
Sure.
wish someone would write
No,
that book.
right, exactly. No, that's definitely the case. I mean, I think a lot of the dealers also thought that the print fairs, likewise for their private clients, it gave them an opportunity to meet the curators at these fairs. And I think a lot of dealers look at the print fairs as an opportunity for basically a synergistic relationship, exchange of information, exchange of ideas. And so it did provide a forum for that, and something else that we had thought about that would make the print fairs worthwhile.
Right. We did at the Baltimore Museum, we did get dealers that would come through on a basically annual basis. Jim Bergquist used to come through and, he'd bring his boxes and he'd pull out all of the wonderful things that he had and let us go through the boxes ourselves. But then we'd go into the storeroom and dig out our, the BMA's impression of X, Y, and Z and compare them and assure him that he
Right.
had a better one or whatever the situation was. But it was, it was this great, like, time to look with somebody who knew a whole lot more than I did because I was just trying to skim off the top and make sure the details were there. I'm no specialist in old master prints, so it was always great to have him in the storeroom.
Well, Bergquist is a legend. So him and Eric Carlson, they were tremendous. They were often a tag team,
Yeah.
who both of them, by the way, exhibited at the first New York Fine Print Fair.
Are there available records of who showed for all of the fairs going back?
Yeah, I have catalogs or pamphlets of most of the ones that I ran in the 1980s and then the early 1990s. But yes, I mean, if I can indulge, the first New York Fine Print Fair was held not at the Armory, but was held in 1984 at the Lillie Deveraux Blake School, PS6, on Madison Avenue. And we held it in the accommodation auditorium gym. I remember when we came up with the idea to do this at the coaching of the woman who helped run the initial Washington Fair, Pamela Hatte, and a gentleman by the name of Ron Lazon, who's still an active dealer. They said, why not do this in New York? And they looked at me because I'm in New York, and that was the point person. So the point is that I had to beg 20 dealers. And a lot of the dealers said, oh, well, let's see how it goes the first year. Well, the first year, you couldn't walk down the aisles. In fact, here's another James Berquist reference. I remember James Berquist walking past me during the Saturday, and he had this huge smile on his face, walking rapidly down the aisle with a couple of prints and saying, this is kind of like a medieval fair, and we're all hawking our wares. But all the dealers did very well. And it was such a homemade affair to some degree that my father provided a couple of cases of wine, and my mother catered a dinner for the dealers on Friday night. It was a quickly put together event to some degree because of the time frame, but it turned out to be a really, really wonderful success and really set the tone for what was to come in years to come, including today.
Yeah, it's certainly a model for all of us who followed in your footsteps for fairs.
Yeah.
Did you guys have booths or just tabletops, or what'd you do in the auditorium?
No, I had hard walls built.
Oh my.
I believe the first one, they all had basically what they call, I guess, a 6 foot or 9 foot butterfly. In other words, it was 3 panels that you could fold out, and then the folding out would preserve the integrity for it standing upright.
Wow.
So, and then we had tables, of course.
Right.
Because of the space, I believe the first one we only had 2 6-foot tables per dealer.
Right. Yeah. Knowing now the cost of building out the walls and doing the lights for the fair for the Baltimore Print Fair, I can only imagine what hardwood fold outs would cost today.
Well, I mean, that one we're talking back in 1984, and I had a friend of mine who was a carpenter, built the walls.
Oh wow.
So he cut me a hometown deal, so to speak. So that was fine. But as we'll see, the fair was such a success at PS6, and all the dealers that didn't do the first fair in 1984 said, oh, wow, I want in. So we went from 20 dealers to 65 dealers and had to move it to the Armory in 1985.
Wow.
And that's what got that one started.
Wow. Were the first 20 mainly old master through 19th century, or were there contemporary people sprinkled in?
There were 1 or 2 contemporary people. Obviously, we've now done the inverse to a large degree. I mean, some of the dealers that originally exhibited in 1984 at the first one are still close friends and colleagues. I mean, people like Bill Carl and Egon Tigert and Pia Gallo and Alan Hill and Leslie, they were all there as well. Berquist was there. Eric Carlson was there. So we had an all-star, I like to think we had an all-star roster. And these people have proved throughout the ages, they try things. And I'm very thankful to all of them and still very proud to call all of them friends. That was basically the core that was to follow us throughout the next couple of years while I ran the fair.
But the International Fine Print Dealers Association had already been founded, and were they together the whole time?
No. The International Fine Print Dealers Association wasn't founded, I believe, until 1991, 1992. However, the notion for forming these print fairs had something of an organization like that in mind. I mean, for example, a lot of us got together. One of the items that was brought forth was the fact, well, we have this organization of dealers, and we didn't call ourselves anything at that particular point. But, maybe we could form some sort of organization, for example, to get group health care, that kind of thing. We can get maybe group liability insurance. I found out shortly thereafter, that was impossible to get because we all had different specifications. But certainly the health insurance and certainly the educational aspect for sponsoring educational ventures and so forth, that was always in the mix. The founders of the International Fine Print Dealers Association, or what was to become the International Fine Print Dealers Association, were also exhibitors at the fair, starting in 1985, which was our first year at the Armory, and basically continued until 1991, when the organization, I believe, was formally founded.
Oh, okay. Got it. And so then you hired a person and actually paid them to be the executive director?
Well, what happened then, the International Fine Print Dealers Association hired Sanford Smith, who was a professional show organizer, to run the fair
Okay.
at the Armory,
Got it. Okay. Oh, gosh, see, I didn't
right?
know any
I
of this.
was out by that time.
Oh,
I
there's a
wanted,
story there. Oh, no.
oh, yeah, that's another story. That's why I was a little nervous about touching on these subjects because, I mean, just to enlighten the viewers of this podcast, the art world, as you well know, is exciting, but it also has its intrigue. It also has its dark side. It also has a lot of highs, has a lot of lows, both collectively and also individually. We deal with each situation as they come up and make the best decisions for ourselves as they come up. And we let go. Let's put it that way.
Things have morphed and changed over time, is what you're saying.
Yes, yes. The situation's changed over time,
Yeah.
of course.
I always encourage listeners to make the trip to New York to go to the various fairs, of which there have been, up to 4, and now we're down to 2, it looks like. But they're so worth it. For me, as a person who's going to the fair, all the intrigue, but I mean, I'm always, curious about the intrigue,
Sure,
but it
sure,
doesn't matter
sure.
because you're just going to see great art and talk to you guys.
Exactly. But of course, but that's the bottom line. I mean, that's the real issue. The real issue is to look at art, enjoy the art, ask questions about it, ask questions about the artist, how it fits into the scheme of graphic art history, how it relates to your life, how it relates to life in general, what makes this work special. And that's something that each and every person that comes to a print fair, can ask a dealer or ask other dealers. I mean, it's a very synergistic experience. I mean, most of us have no problem about a potential client looking at a print in one dealer's booth and that person saying, "Hey, do you mind if I take it over to so and so and have them get a second opinion?" That's part of the fun. That's part of the learning experience. And so, again, one more reason why these print fairs, I think, are so valuable.
Oh, I agree for sure. Every year, there's some aspect of art making that has risen up a bit and is, way more expensive than it used to be suddenly, like all the
Sure.
cassettes and like, what happened?
Well, I mean, just on that point, and one of the great revelations for me at this last New York Satellite Print Fair was Tom Huck. Holy cow! What the,
You
what?
mean
I
his
mean, it
prices have
was,
gone
it
up
was,
a bit?
well, no, I'm just talking about his
Oh,
techniques and
yeah.
so forth, and his inventiveness as a printmaker. So, I mean, that was for me a revelation because I kind of hide in my hole of, kind of academic art, 19th century, 20th century, 17th century, and so forth. And so I don't get out enough to see that his kind of work. So that was kind of revealing to me.
That's great. Huck has been on Platemark twice, and and
Right.
he's like, I'm on speed dial. Sometimes he'll call and say, "How much should I charge for this?" I'm like, "Well, if I was a curator and I was buying you, I would, hope to spend X." We
Sure.
go from there. Well, so sometimes there's an impression of something that you have, and then across the way there'll be Edo will have the same thing, and the prices will vary. So then, what happens? Like, do you say, "Hey, you can get it better over there," or "I'm going to match the price"? Like, how does that work?
I think it really depends on each individual dealer. I mean, I think each dealer sets their prices according to what their opinion is, obviously, of the quality of the impression, the condition, although I'm sure some of the dealers think about, what their overhead is, of course, but also obviously what they paid for it. I've never noticed that a colleague would badmouth my impression in any way. And so it really just comes down really to each customer's preference and their own decision. It would be disappointing if I didn't sell it, but on the other hand, also, that's for the potential client to decide. Sometimes the other dealer and I would get together and we compare our two impressions side by side, but it's all done in a very friendly, collegial way.
Hope so.
Yeah, I mean, I have to tell you, for the most part, I get along extremely well with all my colleagues, and I would hope that they get along with me because we all work together. We all have our common goal. It happens sometimes where you have a comparison, and it's usually a collaborative experience and a very educational experience.
I think new collectors probably, I mean, they'll learn it really fast. But one, you guys all know each other and you talk, so don't say something
Right.
crappy about that guy in front of another dealer because it'll come back to you.
It comes
It
back.
does.
Right. Well, that's the thing. It's what your grandmother taught you. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it.
Right. Exactly.
But I can't think of an instance where that has really, in a sense, happened.
Right.
So we have mutual respect. We know our job because our job is their job. We all want the same
Right.
results.
All boats rise. I mean, I always say about print fairs that print people are the nicest people, and I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times, and I part of it I think is because everybody has a shared database of images, because of the multiplicity. So if you and Ed have the
Correct.
same, impression of one thing, that everybody has this collective knowledge, and I think for the buyer, it offers such a wonderful educational and fun opportunity to take these deep dives between you and Ed and whoever else. Just, I
Sure.
mean, it's so much better than Art Miami.
Well, I mean, the print fairs, again, that's one of the other aspects of the print fairs as we've set up. They're more like boutique fairs in a sense. And they do allow for more intimacy. They do allow for more feedback from each other. They allow for more contact and allow a dealer and a customer to exchange more ideas, not in hello and goodbye, nice to see you, Ed or Bill or Bernard, what do you think of this impression that I have? Or gives also people an opportunity to be able to sell their work if that's the case. So the boutique fairs, I think, are I've felt very comfortable with the way they've been run and the way they are.
I feel like I've known dealers who've bought from other dealers at the fairs.
Oh
I
yes.
mean, this is
Oh
things
yeah.
that
I
people
mean, I
don't
would.
know.
Oh yeah. No, no. I would think that. I mean, I know for a fact that some of the best deals, in a sense, that dealers get are from other dealers, and it's not because the seller didn't know about it and so forth. It may be that the seller is just not interested in this particular artist, or the seller is not interested in this particular area, or the purchaser has an all set buyer for it. So yes, I mean, a lot of dealers buy from other dealers, and we're happy to do so.
Where do you source most of your inventory? Are you an European auction guy, or do you have a lot of things that come back to you that are secondary?
Well, that's I like that question. Basically, for me, it's all over. I mean, I buy heavily in Europe. I buy at auction here in the United States. I have this policy where if anybody buys something from me, as long as they're the original owner, art's kind of like love. Sometimes you fall out. And so if someone's purchased something from me, they can trade it back to me for what they paid for it and then select anything else that I have in inventory at that time. It shows faith in my inventory. A couple other dealers do it as well. That hasn't happened a whole lot, but I'll also purchase from estates individual pieces or whole collections. It really depends on the circumstance, and it really depends on how it fits in with my inventory. I will tell you that there was a time where I was early in my career where I was gung ho on going to estate sales and garage sales and so forth. I have never found anything of worth at an estate sale for me, and obviously I've been at the wrong ones, maybe because I'm not willing to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. But I have my other sources. I have an antique dealer friend who does source those 4 a.m. estate sales where he gets in line and gets a ticket and has come away with some wonderful things. Not the way I want to do business, but bless him for being a major finder for
Right.
me.
Someone's got to do it.
There you go. One of the other things I wanted to mention before, if I can just interject here, is that I touched on the educational aspect of the print fairs. And when we set up the New York Print Fair at the Armory, they had two rooms in the front. both with glass by Tiffany, hence the Tiffany room. And one of the things that we did was that we set up a lecture series at those fairs at the Armory. And so we invited print people to come in and lecture on a topic of their choice. I remember one talk by Gabriel Weisberg. He came in and gave a wonderful talk on 19th century French prints. And there were so many others. Those are listed, I believe, also in the programs. And then also we set up an internship program. We threw in 6 graduate students in the area of printmaking. And I think the 2 schools that benefited most from this were University of Wisconsin and Kansas out in Lawrence. Steve Goddard also was a lecturer at one of the fairs as well. The fairs were envisioned as this synergistic event where you can buy and sell prints, but also educate yourself as to different aspects of graphic art history.
There have been a proliferation and maybe now a shrinking back of museums doing their own small print fairs. And for us at the Baltimore Museum, that fair started in 1990, so not long after the New York Fair. And it was annual for 10 years, and then it went to biennial because it was just a lot of work, and it took up, it took up gallery space, valuable gallery space, and
Sure. The New York Fair was set up at the Armory. That kind of sparked the development, and we had print fairs at one point in the late 1980s, and some of these print fairs are still in existence. We had print fairs in Washington, Charlotte, North Carolina, San Antonio, still in existence. Washington, obviously, is also still in existence. Milwaukee, we tried one. We did one in Minneapolis, did one in San Diego, Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, San Francisco. Portland is now in existence. That's a museum-sponsored fair. And we also did print fairs in Hartford, Connecticut, Rochester, New York, Albany, New York. Obviously, Cleveland is still in existence. That's one of the major ones as well. Some of these lasted 2 years and then went away. Some of them got revived, but there are 5 or 6 good print fairs still on a continual basis here in the United States, thanks to the hard work of Bernard DeRoit and Ed Pollock.
Yeah, they do work hard, those two.
Oh, my goodness.
I know. I met them in person for the first time this year at the Satellite Fair.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, I'd never connected with them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, it was great to meet them face to face.
Well, see, there you go. You're meeting. You're putting a face with the dealer.
Well, and the other reason the New York Fair is so great for me, I mean, when I was at the museum, it was like one-stop shopping for the year. You had your whole budget, bing, bing, bing.
Sure.
But also, it was a great place to meet new possible vendors for the Baltimore Fair. And the EAB was always full of emerging shops, and it was always wonderful for us for that reason.
Right.
The museum fairs, I know that a lot of the print groups are co-sponsor or however those are structured, but education is always prime directive one. Because I think we're always fighting to help people understand what's an original print.
Sure. Oh.
Right.
The print fairs were founded, how shall I say? It was another one of those topics that came up from a number of dealers and say, how do we educate people as to what is an original print? And we used to say, print could be the most misconstrued word in the English language. I mean, is a print? Is it a photograph? Is it a reproduction? Is it, oh, you mean original print? Oh, well, yeah, but there are many of them. So how's an original? So we always have to combat this. And sad to say, with the advent of the giclée, in the last several years, the job has become even more ferocious.
Yeah.
To be able to explain exactly what it is. I mean, most after you explain, and again, one of the reasons why we do the print fairs is for education, as you mentioned. And at every print fair, I always have this talk. There's always someone that comes in and say, well, is this an original or is this just a print? So, it's, you're right. It can be very frustrating, but the form of a print fair, you can educate people one by one. And if you can make a convert, all the better.
That's right. I always talk about the speed bump we got to get you over, and then we got you.
Exactly. Then they're hooked.
Yeah, exactly. there's an accepted, understood markup from when you buy something at auction to what you set the price at for retail. And I mean, is
Hmm.
there like an agreed upon, 10%, whatever the number is, or is it just sort of like do you have to assess everything based on how does that work?
You're talking about how does one price a print?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, yeah, it varies from dealer to dealer. The factors that enter into it are one, obviously what you paid for it. Two, past recorded prices for the print, so you know that you're in the ballpark. Three, to a large degree, the dealer's own prejudice, good prejudice, meaning that what do they really feel this print is worth, and that comes from their experience in the field, their graphic art history training, their understanding of graphic art history. In other words, how important is this print in the scheme of things? How important is it in the scheme of the artist's own core of work? And then you have the mundane factors as far as built-in overhead, that kind of thing.
But sometimes you get a real deal at an auction, right? And then,
Well, this is interesting you say that. The auction market really changed in the late 1960s, early 1970s, when Sotheby's and Christie's introduced their buyer's premium. Sotheby's and Christie's, and I'm just using those as the example because those are the two big players on the block, they tried to play it really both ways back then, where in the late 1960s, early 70s, about 70% of the buyers of prints were dealers. And it used to be viewed as a wholesale market, all right, for dealers. But when the premium came into play, and when Sotheby's and Christie's took more aggressive marketing strategies, they played both ends against the middle. They would tell a potential buyer, oh, buy at Sotheby's, Christie's, you're buying at auction, and if you're buying at auction, that obviously means a lower price. On the other hand, also, for a seller, they would say, well, auction is the best way to do because then you're assured the highest price because at auction, it takes two. And so they played both ends against the middle. So starting really in the 1970s, that shift between the dealer wholesale concept and private people, private collectors wanting to buy at auction started to shift. And I was speaking with a print specialist at one of the auction houses a year or so ago. I asked him this particular question, and he thought that it was probably now maybe 40% dealers and 60% private buyers.
oh, interesting. I tell you, when a museum curator decides to go after something at auction, it is, it is you have to write up this thing. I mean, of course, you should write up the thing, but then it has to get
Sure.
signed by, and you have this will bid to X, and it's such a pain in the butt.
That's why you want to find a generous donor.
Yes, of course. But then,
Right.
if you hardly ever come across X thing and you don't know where that thing goes after the auction, you're just kind of like, I want that thing for the
Right.
collection.
Well, I mean, maybe it ended up in a dealer's inventory.
Sure.
And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it does pay in that instance to pay a dealer. Obviously, it's been marked up. It's not going to go for the price that the museum had wanted to bid on it. But the advantages then of buying from a dealer is that you can often work out maybe payment terms. You don't have to do the spur of the moment. You're guaranteed about condition and authenticity because apparently supposedly the dealer, has done their homework and made sure that the auction house catalog description was entirely accurate. Auction houses make mistakes as well. We all make mistakes. But again, it's the verification process that is really of most value, I think, to a lot of museums.
Yeah, true.
So if you're going to be paying a premium for it, but it's something that the museum wants and fits into the collection, and the case has been made for its inclusion in the collection, then sometimes it's certainly worth it to buy it from the dealer.
Correct. I agree with
As you well know. I always give a discount to institutions. What that can be depends on really what I paid for it and so forth. or even how long I've had it. There are some dealers that say no discount. There are some dealers that will give a 10% discount, which basically amounts to the sales tax to some degree. And then there are some dealers that will be even more generous. I think it all depends on the situation. Ask for the discount. What's the worst that's going to happen?
You say no.
They're going to say, Ann, I can't do it on this one, or I can give you something. Maybe they can make up for it, maybe with a payment arrangement, whether it's for the museum or if the person is a private client and so forth. A lot of dealers do payment arrangements. Right. I bought my first Old Master print when I was 16 years old from Lucian Goldschmidt, which was just down the street from PS6. Little did I know, right? I walked in and I saw this print, the Mardi Gras by Jan van der Velde, a 17th century Dutch print. Loved it. Don't know why, but I loved it. I went to him with the intent of buying something that day because I wanted to start my print collection. He comes over to me and then invites me to sit in front of his desk in the back. And he says, why do you want to buy this? And I said, I really love it. I love 17th century Dutch art. Explained to him my experiences in the Netherlands and why this night scene appealed to me. And make a long story short, he said, all right, it's a $300. Take it with you. You mail me a check, $50 a month for the next 5 months. I gave him $50 at that point. And he said, this money, you shouldn't be buying print. You should be buying, you should be going out on a date or something. That's what he said. But anyway, that's how I got started.
Funny. Well, that actually...
And then there was the Roten thing, of course.
Oh, okay. So we definitely need to talk about Roten.
So Roten, they were the roving print fairs.
Yeah, so start at the beginning.
Roten, we can even go before them, but Roten played an integral part not only in the education of graphic art history amongst collectors and dealers. A lot of us bought our first prints from their traveling shows at colleges and universities and other institutions.
Wait, can you describe what the whole situation was for people?
Oh, sure. Ferdinand Roten was a gallery in near Baltimore. I'm not sure they were owned by Macmillan Press at the time, but maybe not. No, I think that came after. But anyway, Ferdinand Roten had this idea of traveling print shows. And I think at one time they had like 9 road representatives that would load up their VW buses with just piles and piles of prints. A lot of them, not in boxes, maybe some in boxes. But I remember one Ferdinand Roten dealer who had a VW bus, and he just had stacks and stacks of and piles of prints, and just unloaded them and put them on a dolly and wheeled them into the exhibition room. So, but it was a way to bring the graphic arts, the prints, original prints, to the public. And what these dealers would do would book their appointments, or I'm not quite sure, I was never a Roten rep, but either Ferdinand Roten corporate would book the appointments for each of their territories, and then they would exhibit at places like Syracuse University or Kenyon College or whatever school. They were all divided into territories across the United States. And some of the best print dealers in the United States were former Roten representatials. Conrad Graber was one, Tom French was one, Dan Leno was one. Those are the 3 that come to my mind.
I remember too.
On the top of my head, okay. I wanted to give you more information. I believe Conrad told me that that's how he originally acquired some of his original stock, as did Tom French. And I'm sure Dan Leno as well. And it probably made their decision easier to be able to get into the print business.
Right. So, but when they got to Syracuse or wherever, did they set up like tables in the gym, like a Scholastic book fair, or did they actually hang things?
Exactly. Yeah, or in a seminar room or a classroom, depending on the space that was available. And then they would post the hours. They would put posters throughout the college or the institution and so forth, and invite students and faculty to just look through loads and loads of prints. And oftentimes it was a revelation for a lot of people, collectors, that didn't know they were going to become collectors. So for that purpose, Ferdinand Roten played a really important role, not only in the development of the print fairs, but also in our understanding of what a print is and also the collecting possibilities. Side by side with Ferdinand Roten, and we can certainly go back to Associated American Artists, but we can also go to the print clubs across the United States. Some of them have been in continual practice since the 1920s and 30s, where they would issue a presentation print for subscribers. You want me to go back to
Oh, yes,
Associated
do it.
American Artists? Well, Associated American Artists, I think, probably here in the United States was the marketing mechanism that started the exposure of original prints to the mass public. And they used to say you can own an original work of art for $5 by famous American artists. And so their mail order business mushroomed. There were originally two partners for Associated American Artists, and I believe Sylvan Cole came in a little bit afterwards. But Sylvan was the engine that drove it, so to speak, for years and years until Associated American Artists finally closed. They also educated thousands of people to the niceties of collecting and the intrigue of collecting. You know, the Associated American Artists story is really kind of a story in itself, and I'm not going to be able to really do it justice here, but they really had a real influence as far as how we see art and how we collect art here in the United States. Going hand in hand with Associated American Artists, the Print Club of Cleveland, I believe, was founded before the Associated American Artists in the 1920s. And the Print Club of Cleveland, excuse me if that fact is wrong, but it's somewhere, let's say it's around the time the Associated American Artists was founded. But the concept of print clubs was that the organization was formed by people that loved prints. They understood what a print was, and they wanted to make prints available to their members. And so for a subscription or for club dues, they would commission an artist to do an original print in addition of however many members were in the club at the time. And so the three oldest print clubs that are still in existence today are the print clubs in Cleveland, Rochester, and Albany. All three of them have continually published prints for their members. Lately, in the 2000s, there was a revival of the Print Club of New York, which does obviously a fantastic job and has had some very noteworthy artists for their presentation prints. And there have been print clubs that have come and gone. There was the Miniature Print Club Society. There was the Print Club of Buffalo. There was a print club in Boston. So it goes on and on. I think it's a worthy pursuit. And for those that are interested, all the print clubs that I mentioned that are still in existence will sell to non-members. So I think you just have to go on their websites and take a look.
I feel like there's this sort of morph from the artist groups like the Etching Society and the Woodcut Society and all them into these collecting
Correct.
groups. It's this fascinating
Yes.
history.
Yeah, there used to be the Brooklyn Society of Etchers, which is now SAGA, Society of American Graphic Artists. All these groups continued and made graphic arts more accessible to people.
And then there's also the annual exhibitions that Brooklyn did, Una Johnson, and the Hader Atelier
Right.
17 traveling shows. Like there's a lot in the, not to mention the Print Council shows that went around
Right.
the country. I mean, it's kind of a crazy crazy history.
Well, yeah. These traveling shows are all meant, to have people to have access to these things. I mean, for example, Syracuse University has a tremendous print collection, and at any one time, they have 6 or 7 traveling shows going out around the United States. Dominic Iacano, who was the director there, now retired, and in the interest of transparency, a good friend of mine, just wanted to drop him in there.
Hey, Dominic.
Hey, Dominic. He was a spearhead for that kind of thing. Sylvan Cole was a mentor of his, and he took a lot of what Sylvan taught him to be able to build and expand not only the physical collection at Syracuse, but also the ideas behind print collecting and disseminate those ideas and those techniques to be able to bring potential print collectors and print enthusiasts into the fold.
Right. I feel like we're at a tipping point, not only in terms of the generational shift of all of the people who were under Roten and whoever else. as they are thinking about retiring, but also that there are trends in museums to parse out sections of the print collections to the person who's in charge of, the European painting guy gets the European prints and the American people get and so there's this kind of diminution of the at least on the museum end that's just horrifying to me, of course, because I don't know, I feel like we're there. It's time for another, like,
Tipping point.
hey, prints are here.
Well, I mean, I think you're right. One of the challenges that a lot of us have, a lot of us dealers have, our careers have kind of gone along with the curators to whom we've dealt. And those curators are now retiring. And so we have to build new relationships and so forth. And so sometimes when I call in a museum and find out that the curator for prints and drawings no longer exists, it's been incorporated into collections management, or the curator for American and European art, or find out that if in fact there is a prints and drawings curator, but their real main interest is digital photography, it's work. I mean, it's building relationships again. So that part of a dealer's life is challenging as well. And I presume also for the curators, because their specialties sometimes then get put into the same pot as someone else's. As we said at the beginning of this podcast, times are changing, and I think you're right. We are at a tipping point, at least a generational tipping point to some degree. But I think that those of us who love prints and want to champion the cause for prints as a collecting avenue will carry on.
That's right.
So we'll continue to educate.
I'm not giving up.
No, me neither. So
Before I let you go, I always
Sure.
want to ask, when did you figure out that prints were a thing that you were interested in? And because that you don't take a class in it at school, right? Like, you have to trip
Right.
over it.
Yeah, I think for me, and I think also for a lot of other dealers, I think there are two things. One, initially, maybe perhaps price point, right? It's something you could buy fairly easily. But the other thing, I think probably maybe even more important, is that with prints and drawings, they're more intimate. You can handle them. You can really get up close to them. And it's nothing to say that I wouldn't have loved to have, owned a Georges de la Tour painting or whatever, or a Vermeer painting and so forth. But that wasn't going to happen, obviously. And the fact that, as far as prints and drawings are concerned, it's not only the intimacy of holding the work and studying it really up close in your home or wherever. You can also see a developmental process. That for me is very important. I want to see where the artist's mind was. I want to see what the progression of thought was, what the inspiration was, and how it came out on the paper. For example, nothing fascinates me more than a set of progressive proofs, or seeing an artist do a preparatory drawing for it and then see how it translates out into an etching or a mezzotint or lithograph. So the process for me has always been fascinating and inspiring, because it tells me where an artist's been and where they went.
In a way that you can't often glean in other media, really.
True.
Yeah.
True. I mean, you can certainly do that with paintings. I mean, you can see preparatory drawings of paintings all the time.
But the States, right? When did you first come to know that prints were a thing that you liked and wanted to pursue?
I'm thinking that it was probably to a visit at the Museum of Fine Arts, the Musée des Beaux-Arts in Bordeaux. We lived near there at the time. And I was probably like 12 or 13 years old. And my sister and I would go see my aunt, who lived in Bordeaux, who invited us for lunch every Saturday. And we followed for a trip to the museum. And I remember seeing an exhibition of Barbizon prints at the museum. Just kind of lingered and so forth. And it wasn't an epiphany at that point, but I realized that a week later, 6 months later, a year later, I would always think about that show.
And Barbizon prints aren't the most exciting.
No, they weren't. But I think I was attracted to them because they were calm and somber and maybe a little dark and so forth. But there was But I saw, I mean, there was a lot of detail. I mean, from the etchings to the cliché verts. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that a couple of the Barbizon artists had originally come from the Bordeaux area. So that kind of sparked my interest as well. And then that kind of lingered with me. When we moved back to New York when I was 16, I started looking at bookstores and galleries, and then the Lucian Goldschmidt event came up because I came across one of his old catalogs in a used bookshop and started looking at his work and so forth. Decided to make the trip to go see him when I was 16. And then the first print, and then my first Roten show, and I was off and running.
Where did you go to college?
I was at the University of Rennes in Brittany for undergraduate. And then also for my American BA was at RIT, Eisenhower College, up in upstate New York. Graduate school here in the States at the American Graduate School of International Management.
Oh, okay. And did any of those places have a history of prints class?
RIT has a printmaking workshop that I got involved there to some degree.
Oh, are you a maker?
Yes and no. I really love the technical process. And I taught a history of printmaking course at Long Island University for a number of years. And they had a printmaking workshop on campus called the Powerhouse Printmaking Workshop. And I became friends with their director, who's a noted printmaker, and a guy by the name of Rick Mills. I was very comfortable giving technical advice as far as some of the students were concerned. And so I would give them advice as far as how to bite a plate, what's your concentration nitric acid, what paper to use, what PSI you should use for the press, that kind of thing. I was adept at that, but to say that I'm a printmaker, I would say no.
This is why you and True Ludwig get along so well, because you both come to the history of prints with the knowledge of the maker.
There you go. Oh, okay. Yeah. Where is True? I wanted to see him.
I know. Drew's at his day job.
Okay, yeah. There you go. Well, he'll see this.
I know. I suspect you two will get together soon.
I'm sure we have a beverage date at some point.
That's right.
There we go.
Yeah, I know. It's been tough getting back rolling with our History of Print series on Platemark, but I think we have a date to record this Sunday. So we'll keep moving on with the reproductive print.
Okay, yeah. Great. Yeah. No, all the podcasts are great. I wait for them with bated breath because they're so informative. They're so informative.
Thank you.
I'll even listen to this one.
Yeah, when True was teaching history of prints at Micah, he brought the class to the BMA's print room 6 times or whatever. And so I was just like the holder upper of the thing, and I'd listen and then I'd tune out because I was shuffling, and then I'd come back in and I hear something else. And so doing this podcast has been great for me because it's like getting cemented now into my brain. Finally.
Sure. Exposure is everything. And when I was teaching, whatever subject I was teaching, I always thought the way to teach was to make the connections, was to make it as interdisciplinary as possible. And that's why, to a large degree, going off a little bit on a tangent here, but printmaking is really not only the history of graphic arts per se, but it's so interdisciplinary because it's also the history of music, it's the history of literature, it's the history of social and current events and so forth. And obviously it's the most democratic form of art because it's a way to disseminate events and ideas, and I dare say even feelings. That's, I think, at the heart of people that collect prints. I think that should take major placement as well.
Yeah, I agree. Clearly we're cheerleaders, both of us.
Yes, definitely.
So where is the next show you will be vending at?
The next print fairs will be in the Los Angeles Pasadena show. And then a week after that will be the San Francisco Berkeley show in early February.
And I have been following people who have been doing both of them. It seems like all of you guys are traveling from one to the next one as like this sort of carnival show. It's hilarious watching you guys.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. A traveling fair, so to speak. I won't be going on to Portland, but maybe I'll be doing Portland next year.
Okay.
We'll see.
And are you doing Capitol in March?
I'm doing Capitol as well. And I'll be doing the online shows that go concurrently with it as well. We live in a very glorious business. We're always trying to have to fix computers. We're filling out our sales tax forms. We're entering inventory and so forth. So, yeah, it's glamorous. So it is. It's a lot of fun.
Do you have
It's a lot of
a work that you bought early on that you can never sell, that is your, sort of like your anchor?
Yes. Yes. There's one work that I bought. I actually found it in an antique store in Dallas, Texas in '83. And it's a pencil drawing of an old woman in profile by a northern French artist by the name of Paul Alexandre Deschmacher. And I still have it, and I'll post it.
Okay, good. Yeah, send me a picture.
For you. I will. I'll do that. I've never been able to part with it. It's just there. I don't know why.
Yeah, over the years, I thought I'd really be a great collector of art. I'm not sure I could be a dealer because I don't think I could part with things very easily.
Well, that's a real salient point. Number one rule of retail is don't fall in love with the merchandise. A lot of us are pretty disciplined that way. We love what we buy, of course, but then we know when it's time to sell because that's why we're in business. A friend of mine who has set himself up as a gallery, and he has thousands of works of art, mostly prints, some drawings, but mostly prints, thousands in his house, and he sets it up as a gallery for his taxes and all that. But in the 25, 30 years that I've known him, I've never been able to buy from him. He won't sell anything. He's really a collector with the sign dealer.
Don't tell the IRS.
There you go. No. That's why no names.
Oh, that's funny.
But it takes all. What I'm saying is that it takes all types.
Yes. Right. Okay.
So.
Cool. Well, thank you. We've been talking for over an hour, so maybe we ought to cut it off. Although I'd love to keep going.
Okay. Well, we can always do a part 2 on something
That's right.
else.
We can do a reprise
at some point in the future.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's so many aspects to the late 20th century, the Rotens and the whole, all of that stuff that I think need to be recorded. So I'm glad that we were able to touch on it.
Yeah, I can provide you with a lot of the archival material for the print fairs.
That's cool. That's really cool. Also, I wanted to mention before we go that the Associated American Artists, there's a wonderful book that Liz Seaton wrote.
Oh, yeah. Art for every home.
Yes, Art for Every Home, which is it's really wonderful.
It's an invaluable source.
Yeah, exactly. I'll put a reference of that book up for people on the show notes.
Excellent.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Thanks for having me on. My best to true.
I will pass that along.
This was a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the opportunity. And I enjoyed it very much.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Platemark with Jeannot Barr. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I find the history of print fairs in the United States fascinating, and I have a feeling that I'll probably talk to some other people who were at the inceptions of other fairs, so stay tuned for those. Thank you to Jeannot for being such a wonderful and willing interviewee, and also a thank you, as always, to Michael Diamond for the use of his original music. All right, I think that's it. We will see you next time.